We'll now resume our program with the next session. The next session title is Energy Transition. And to begin, Mr. Murayama will deliver a keynote address of the topic of realizing a responsible energy transition. Mr. Tetsu Murayama, Managing Director, Country Chair Australia, INPEX Australia, the floor is yours. Please welcome Mr. Murayama to the stage.
Thank you very much, Kaori-san, and good afternoon all. It's a pleasure to be here in beautiful Melbourne on the lands of Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations. I pay my respect to their elders past and present. INPEX is Japanese leading energy company, and we have been a proud member of the Australian business community since 1986. So we are going to celebrate 40th year in business in Australia next year. Now, INPEX Australia has more than 1,500 dedicated and engaged employees, and very proud of them. INPEX is listed on the Tokyo Stock Exchange prime market, and the Japanese government holds a 22% shareholding in INPEX with a golden share to prevent a hostile takeover. Ichthys LNG in Northern Australia sparkles as a crown jewel of the INPEX global portfolio. As an Ichthys joint venture, we have invested in the project more than $50 billion to date. Today, our business in Australia accounts for about 70% INPEX global revenues. With its 40 years production life and decarbonization roadmap, Ichthys LNG will play an important role in supporting Japan's energy security for decades to come. Let's look at the bigger picture. Wood Mackenzie forecasts Asia's LNG demand will nearly double over the next 25 years until 2050, growing from 270 million tons per annum in 2024 to 510 million tons per annum in 2050. At Ichthys LNG, we produce 9 million tons per year LNG every year. And this means that another 26 Ichthys-sized LNG projects will be required to supply new 240 million tons LNG demand only in Asia. For example, India's primary energy consumption increased by 4.3% in 2024. India is the third biggest energy consumer in the world. In 2024, coal accounts for 59% of India's primary energy consumption, while LNG accounts for only 7%. India also needs to reduce its carbon footprint, and there will be a huge LNG demand in India. Even as renewable grows, LNG will continue to play an important role in supplying energy to the world economies. The energy transition will not happen overnight. It's a long journey with no single path. The challenge of realizing a responsible energy transition is addressed in your INPEX Vision 2035, which provides a strategic roadmap for our business over the next decade. INPEX's strategic ambition is the 60-60 target for growth and decarbonization. The first 60 means growing the company's operating cash flow by 60% by 2035. Here in Australia, we are focused on securing new gas resources for backfill Ichthys LNG and exploring the potential for additional LNG train in our Darwin LNG plant. Globally, developing Abadi LNG project in Indonesia will underpin our growth. The Abadi project has recently entered the FEED phase and aims to reach a final investment decision by 2027. We have also invested in renewable energy project in Australia through our 50-50 joint venture with Green Power, known as Potential Energy, to support Australia's renewable energy target of achieving 82% renewable electricity generation by 2030. Potential Energy has an operating renewable power generation capacity of more than 800 megawatt across the country and has a project pipeline of over 9 gigawatt. The second 60 in the 60-60 target means reducing our scope 1 to 2 carbon emission intensity by 60% by 2035. Carbon capture and storage is a top priority of INPEX. Here in Australia, our proposed Bonaparte CCS project, working together with Total Energies and Woodside Energies, has exciting potential to help decarbonize Australia and in the Pacific region. With a positive result of the appraisal program conducted last year, Bonaparte CCS is proving to be one of the most promising carbon dioxide storage sites globally, with a potential to inject more than 10 million tons per annum. And Ichthys LNG is expected to be the foundation customer. The project, Bonaparte CCS project, was awarded major project status last month by the Australian government. In concluding, I would like to underscore that with abundant natural resources, of course including natural gas, and significant potential for carbon capture and storage, Australia should continue to play a critical role to realize a responsible energy transition in the Pacific region. At INPEX, we are committed to supplying energy for a brighter future and responsible energy transition. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Murayama. Please take your seat on stage. Thank you. We'll now move on to the panel discussion. Here we have distinguished panelists. Right to me, to myself from your perspective, Ms. Samantha McCulloch, Chief Executive Australian Energy Producers. And we have Dan Brown, Co-Chair Energy Industry, Ashurst Australia. And Ben Ellis, Vice President Sales and Marketing Sustainability, BHP. Please welcome our distinguished panelists. The theme today is how Australia and Japan can effectively collaborate to achieve decarbonization goals and ensure energy security. Let's begin with our first question to Samantha. What are the key trends or case studies that you are paying attention to in balancing security of energy supply and decarbonization efforts between our countries?
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. It's been a very good discussion so far. Look, I think what I wanted to pick up on is, including some of what Tetsu raised, is just the importance of the Australia-Japan relationship, and particularly that investment relationship in resources and energy. I mean, Australia is one of the largest exporters of LNG in the world, and we hold that status in large part because of the investment of Japanese companies. We've seen more than $400 billion invested into the Australian LNG sector in the last decade or so. That's delivered enormous economic benefits for Australia. So that's almost $100 billion a year economic contribution. Last year alone, there were $22 billion that went into state and federal government budgets for royalties and taxes. And the industry is supporting around 215,000 Australian jobs. So it's a key part of Australia's economic security. It's supporting Japan's energy security. We're providing around 40% of the LNG needs of Japan. And the good news is that this is a really long-term opportunity. So Tetsu mentioned the growth in LNG demand, and what we're seeing just here in our region, as much as an 8 or 10-fold increase in LNG demand right on our doorstep to help with the energy transition, to help support energy security, economic growth, but also decarbonisation goals. Now, this is another opportunity for us to work closely with our Japanese partners to capture those markets. We have abundant resources here in Australia. We are so blessed in terms of our energy resources, enough to supply our local markets, but also that role in terms of regional energy security. CCS is another opportunity, I think, building on our relationship around LNG and other energy trade. We have a long history of working with Japanese partners on the technology, but more and more we're seeing now this interest in being able to ship CO2 back to Australia because countries like Japan aren't blessed with the geology that we are here in Australia. But really ensuring that we're in a position to capture those opportunities will take some further work. And I think we heard that in the last session, that it's not a given that Australia is going to be, the natural trading partner moving forward. We have so much competition from other countries, including for our energy exports, including for new technologies, whether it's CCS or low carbon hydrogen. So we really need to ensure that we're doing a lot more to promote that investment into Australia, to promote Australia as a reliable and trusted trading partner moving forward. And I'm happy to sort of talk more about some of those themes.
Thank you, Samantha. Dan, could you give us your perspective on this?
Yeah, thank you very much for having me here today. This is a fantastic forum and I'm really grateful to be part of it. I also think it's timely that we're having this forum at the same time that our Productivity Reform Commissioner, Danielle Woods, is presenting to the National Press Gallery on productivity reform here in Australia, and I think there's an absolute linkage between productivity reform and the issues that we're talking about today. And so I might just take a little bit more of a macro approach around the energy security piece. If we sort of put to one side the geopolitical issues that we've seen play out in recent years in Eastern Europe, in North America, and in the Middle East, I think the key piece that we need to be focusing on from energy security here in Australia is policy certainty. And some of the rumblings around what's going to be coming out of this Productivity Commission and the Economic Reform Roundtable that a bunch of our stakeholders here in Australia are travelling to Canberra to over the next few days is really trying to drive, I hope, much greater policy certainty around whether or not we'll have a carbon tax, policy certainty around how we will be shaping our labour markets, how we'll be securing our supply chains. And so from a broader energy security perspective, I think that policy certainty is going to be fundamental. It'll be fundamental in the context of the domestic gas reservation discussions that are going on. We're talking about LNG at the moment. It's really important to get clear on what that looks like. It's important to get clear on what coal closures look like and that security for those electrons in our market. How we're going to build out our variable renewable generation. What are we doing to overcome the challenges with transmission delays and cost overruns? And the same sort of context applies with offshore wind. And one of the earlier speakers today spoke about, delay being the key piece. That's fundamentally right in my view, that delay is going to be crippling, that huge part of our energy security that we need as a nation, but also to help support our nearest neighbours in Asia.
Thank you. And Dr. Ben Ellis, could you weigh in as well?
Yeah, thank you very much, Kaori-san, and it's fantastic to be here. And it's very timely to be here in Melbourne, which is the home of BHP, as we celebrated our 140th year anniversary just last week. And Japan has played a really important part of that history from 1966, when we shipped our first cargo of iron ore from Mount Newman. Japan's been a really important business partner to BHP. Look, I probably take a little bit, look at things slightly different from a minerals point of view, and I think Australia and Japan has a great opportunity to partner together on decarbonising downstream steelmaking value chain. If you think about the steel industry across Asia, there's more than 1 billion tonnes of steel that's produced annually. And on average, the steel that's produces around 2 tonnes of CO2 per tonne of steel. So that's a massive amount of CO2. And the size of the challenge is immense, and there's no single pathway that's going to, there's no silver bullet that's ultimately going to solve that. And what you're going to see is different regions like Japan, like China, like India, all follow different pathways. And really, we have great, fantastic collaborations with our Japanese joint venture partners, Mitsui, Tetsu, but also our Japanese steelmaking customers, JFE, Nippon Steel and Kobe, and we're working very closely together to, how do we tackle that problem of steel decarbonisation?
Thank you. Thank you very much for all your insights. Now, moving on to the next question, how can Australia and Japan collaborate more effectively to achieve their decarbonization goals and ensure energy security? And just some of you mentioned about the role of government policies in this collaboration. Samantha, may I start with you again?
Sure, thank you. I mean, when we're looking at the Japanese-Australia relationship and collaboration, obviously starting from a very strong foundation, and you can, have heard already today about how that relationship's both broaden and become more broad and more deep in terms of the industries and the opportunities. Thinking more specifically around energy policy and particularly gas, I think a key challenge in recent years is that we've really had a very dynamic policy environment. That's my polite way of putting it. There's been a large number of reforms, of interventions that have unquestionably concerned our major trading partners and major investors. When you're investing billions of dollars into Australia, one of the key drivers of that is that Australia has always been such a stable, competitive destination for investment. So how do we ensure that we restore that confidence for our investors, that we have that policy stability and security? I think particularly we're just talking about delays. I mean, dealing with some of the regulatory issues, given we are in a very competitive environment for global capital, we are seeing investments going overseas. We are seeing, countries like Japan really diversifying in terms of where they're getting their energy from. If we're going to be able to compete, we need to be dealing with things like our regulatory approval system. That's an opportunity, I think, the number one opportunity for the productivity or the economic reform roundtable this week. For me, what I see as most concerning is, when we look at where Australia sits in the global portfolio, we know gas is going to play an important long-term role. Countries like Canada, the US, Qatar are all building their exploration development programs for gas and for LNG. On average around the world, we've seen a 30% increase in that expenditure in the last, since about 2020. In Australia, it's only been around 15%. And we're an ever-shrinking portion of the investment weight, I suppose, of the portfolio for the large multinationals. So we really need to be focused on how we remain competitive in terms of attracting investment and also then in securing those markets, because there's a huge opportunity there.
Dan, in your view, what should Australia to do more to attract the necessary foreign investments for its decarbonisation efforts?
Yeah, it's a really important question, and probably not surprisingly, it's policy certainty. We've had the CEO of Chevron, Mike Wirth, here, and if you've read the papers, he's been very clear on what he thinks need to change. We need greater policy certainty. We need to remove delays from permitting and approvals. We need to sort our workforce issues out. And off the back of those uncertainties, we're seeing $100 billion of investment from Chevron walking away from Australia and finding a home somewhere else. And so, picking up on Samantha's point, what was, traditionally, notwithstanding the recent dynamicism, a stable policy environment that was great for attracting overseas investment, it's now becoming less stable. And if we look back at the beautiful friendship and long-term strategic relationship that Australia and Japan share across many sectors and industries, how can we help facilitate the sort of government-to-government dialogues to really drive the certainty that we need? How can we come together from a business perspective to have business-to-government dialogues to again try and drive that certainty that we need to really unleash that investment opportunity that sits in our backyard?
Tetsu, your thoughts on this?
Thank you. I 100% agree with my colleague panelists said on the stable policy settings is essential for INPEX to make investment. INPEX has a project pipeline which requires billions of dollars to invest in Australia. And as I managing director and country chair of INPEX Australia, Actually, I'm going to Tokyo next week to meet with the CEO and CFO and to explain make a presentation on the next year's budget. And they're going to ask this, Tetsu, are you sure if we can invest in Australia? So I said, yes, sir. But at this moment, I said, oh, yeah, maybe I think so. Oh, Tetsu, stand up. Yes. Are you sure? Yes, I'm sure. This is the, I want to respond to my seniors, but anyway. So a few weeks ago, in Paris, there was the economic reform roundtable organized by Resource Minister King, together with the Megan Queen, who is the Secretary Advisor. And Samantha, I joined the roundtable discussion. And first thing I raised, INPEX concern is a stable policy setting. This is the most important for us to make investment in Australia. But one positive step is that last year Australian government released a future gas strategy, which recognized the importance of gas for up until 2050 and beyond. And also they recognize carbon capture and storage is the important technology to reduce carbon footprint in Australia. So this is a big step forward, but this is just a policy statement. And so we're asking the Australian government to how you implement this policy setting into the real policies. That's our conversation, and we keep on talking with the Australian government, including Minister King and other key ministers in the government. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Ben, can you share some more innovative technologies or practices that are currently being developed or implemented that you believe will significantly contribute to decarbonization in both countries?
Yeah, thank you, Kaori. Look, I think when you look at the sort of global steelmaking technology today, more than 70% of global steelmaking is via the blast furnace BOF route, and as I said, that produces around 2 tonnes of CO2. Now, there is a viable green steel option in the DRI EAF, but that's limited by the amount of scrap and the highest quality raw materials. So really what we're working on with our partners in Asia, in Japan and other countries is how to unlock new green steel pathways or near zero emission pathways for Pilbara iron ores. The Pilbara is really the bedrock of the global steel industry. It produces around 900 million tonnes of high-grade iron ore, and it's really crucial that we do that. So essentially we see 3 pathways to decarbonising the steel industry with Australian ore. The first is modifying the existing blast furnaces through retrofitting technologies, including carbon capture and importantly storing that carbon underground. And secondly is what we call the DRI electric smelting furnace. And this is a really exciting project that we've got, and you may have heard about it. It's called Project NeoSmelt. It's a joint venture that we have with Rio Tinto, with BlueScope Steel, Woodside and Mitsui, and we've selected the location in Kwinana, and it's a new type of furnace which promises initially we'll run it on natural gas, but eventually hydrogen, and it has the potential to reduce emissions right down to say 0.4 tonnes of CO2 per tonne of steel. And then finally is more nascent technology, which is called electrochemical reduction. And through our ventures business, we've invested in a number of these companies that are looking at direct electrolysis of iron ore and turning it into sort of solid iron or solid steel.
Thank you very much. Samantha, talking about new technologies, now what do you think are the biggest challenge in achieving energy security or decarbonization efforts?
No, well, of course, I think what we're seeing at the moment in terms of the transition is still a strong commitment to net zero, a strong commitment to the transition. But as we get further down the path, those sort of challenges and the trade-offs, I suppose, of the transition are becoming more apparent. Technologies that we hoped would emerge are taking longer and perhaps more expensive than many of us would like to see. This is where I think, and this came out of the discussion again this morning, it's really important that we are still maintaining energy security, maintaining the existing system while we're building out the new system, and whether that's thinking about risks around critical mineral availability or more sort of traditional security threats. I think this is where there has been a helpful shift in narrative, particularly around natural gas. So I agree with Tetsu that the release of the Future Gas Strategy last year was very important in sort of cementing that understanding that gas will be part of the transition to 2050 and beyond. I think technologies like CCS are going to be key, and it's not something that we've focused on here in Australia yet. Huge global momentum around CCS, and we now are home to two of the world's largest CCS projects, but it's not getting the strategic support and recognition here in Australia that I think it's getting elsewhere. I think a lot of our focus currently on the transition is around the electricity sector, and of course that's where most economies would start. But really, when we're thinking about industrial decarbonisation, those harder to abate sectors, CCS is going to be key, and this is an opportunity for Australia to be a leader. We have all of the ingredients, we have the geology, the skills, the know-how, the regulatory frameworks. So this should be, I think, more a part of the strategy, particularly at a federal government level.
Thank you, Samantha. Tetsu, could you elaborate a bit more on the potential of Australia in the field of CCS?
Yes, thank you. So we are promoting the Bonaparte CCS project, which is 200 kilometer offshore Darwin. And most challenging thing for INPEX is that regulatory approvals. We need to secure more than 100 government approvals for starting this CCS project. So this is most sequential. Some are overlapping and very time consuming, and we have to go to the all government agencies and departments, and there's no one-stop shopping. So the most challenging thing is the approval. So the second thing I asked Minister King at the Economic Reform Roundtable was to streamlining the approval process. We have experienced already 1 year delay for this Bonaparte CCS project because of the approval delay, mainly due to the offshore consultation process. And if we have additional 1 year delay for this CCS project, it means we have to we are going to miss the opportunity to secure 3 to 5 million ton CO2 just 1 year. This is very, very huge for Australia to decarbonize. So I encourage the government to cut red tape and simplify and streamline the approval process.
Thank you, Tetsu. So, Ben, maybe you are a long player here with 140 years. Could you give us some advices how to deal with the streamlining, the policy settings, and that sort of challenges?
I don't know if I'm the expert in the policy setting, Kaori, but I think I just wanted to add a little bit onto the CCS, just comments just then. I think, I agree, CCS is going to be critically important for our customers, for Japan. I think if you look at our customers and you look at their decarbonisation pathways, almost all of them have a major component of that over the next 20, 30 years is CCS. And on the back of that, just 2 weeks ago, BHP, together with a number of other consortium members, we announced a CCS hub for Asia. It's basically a feasibility study looking at the potential storage locations from the west coast of India all the way across to Japan, Malaysia and Northern Australia. And BHP's role in that is really bringing the emitters together as well as the storage providers, but because we realise it's so crucial to the overall decarbonisation story.
Thank you, Ben. Dan, do you have any comments on the CCS?
Just one further observation, which is the benefit but also the burden of our federation is that we have a series of different governments that have different interests and outcomes based on the colour of the government at the time. And so the coordination from a permitting and approvals pathway is always going to be fraught with delays and other challenges. But specifically around the CCS piece, I think there's a really important role for the governments to expand their mind around allowing the import of CO2 to be stored in those CCS projects here to further underpin the commercial structuring of those deals, because that's really going to help unlock some greater cash flows to support those projects. They cost an incredible amount of money, they take a long time to build. So how I love this concept of the hub around how do we sort of overcome those regulatory hurdles that are holding us back from fully utilising this very expensive technology but important technology that we're developing here.
I was just going to build on that. I think that's a good example in terms of the hub work in the region where Australia is facing competition. So Indonesia, Malaysia, other countries are really moving much faster than Australia to capture that CO2 storage service opportunity, working with Japan, working with Korea and other countries. So unless we can sort of move a bit faster, sort out some of our regulatory and permitting issues, this is a potentially $600 billion opportunity according to a WoodMac study. You know, we have enormous storage resources. This is just sort of oil and gas in reverse. You're putting the CO2 back where, you know, in geology that used to store gas and oil. So we know we can do it. And what a way for Australia to build that strategic role in the region, not only through our other trading relationships and energy security, but actually growing our role in terms of decarbonising the region.
Now, what are the different questions? Please, any panelists could respond. What are the key impacts of United States energy policy? What are the key impacts of the U.S. energy policy on Japan and Australia? And how do these policies influence the bilateral decarbonization efforts? Can someone address that question, please? Tetsu-san?
So I'm so much focused on the Australian, business and also politics. So I'm not very much familiar with the what's going on in the US. Other than President Trump, doing everything and decide one day and make a deal next day. But anyway, so the LNG industry, there's a lot of LNG project in US, mainly the US Gulf of Mexico or Gulf of America. I don't know. But so there's abundant LNG project and flooding into the market. It's mostly cheaper than Australian LNG. So Australia needs to be competitive, to produce LNG and export to Eastern Asian market to compete with the cheaper LNG from US. So in that sense, government doing economic reform, increased productivity, which is good. We support those initiatives, but then I think Australian government has to be careful not to undermine the Australian competitiveness, because at this moment, thanks to the high living standard in Australia, the project construction cost, operating cost, is already higher than the US LNG and also higher than Qatar LNG from Qatar. So we have to develop resources in Australia, but I think Australian government needs to be a bit careful on the unexpected consequences on those reforms.
Thank you. We have talked about lots of things, technologies and policies and competitiveness and global impacts. As we wrap up, please identify one priority that Japan and Australia should focus on first to achieve the stable energy supply and decarbonization efforts. Samantha.
Thank you. Well, as I said, I think I've got a very strong foundation in terms of the relationship. I think there's a great opportunity in terms of deepening that relationship, particularly around energy and encouraging that investment into Australia, continuing to be a reliable and trusted trading partner, and then I think supporting industrial decarbonisation in the region through CCS is the next really big opportunity for us to be working together. I would make the point, just building on Tetsu's comment just now, that really to ensure that we're remaining competitive, we we really need to be focused on our approvals. If you look at some of the examples recently, Northwest Shelf is almost the poster child for the approval system currently, where it takes 7 years for a project that's already operating. It's not a greenfield project, you know, and there's duplication between state and federal approvals. We know this is a priority of government now. Minister Watt is progressing that, including through the roundtables this week. I think it's the #1 opportunity for Australia to get itself back on track.
Dan, could you give us your priority?
Yeah, look, it's very similar to Samantha's. If we look at the Labor landslide, if we want to call it that at the moment, you know, it's almost unprecedented since the Curtin government in the 40s, where we've had a majority so strong that can really, in a positive way, should they choose to do so, influence policy and many other aspects of our economy. And arguably the narrative changed within the Labor government prior to the election around renewables only to now renewables backed by gas. And I think there's for want of a better phrase, a soft underbelly in the Labor policy at the moment. And I think there's a really important opportunity for Japan and Australia to come together to really demonstrate what the impact will be of a poor policy outcome around permitting and approvals, labour, tax reform and certainty, the end of the renewable energy target, the safeguard mechanism, all of those fundamental pieces that are really required to unlock the investment opportunity, and then touching on all of those beautiful things that Ben was talking about around, you know, bringing that investment opportunity for new technologies around green steel and those things to Australia. And if the voices on that are clear and united, and there's some radical candour around caring deeply but challenging directly around the outcomes, and I hope, I'm an optimist, that we might get some policy outcomes that drive us closer to a better outcome.
Thank you. And Ben?
I think for me, it probably sums it up in collaboration. I think that's really key across this challenge. You know, decarbonisation is one that's bigger than any company, any country, any region. We have to work right along the value chain. And I think for the Australian government, I think, yeah, continuing to support R&D and projects through bodies like ARENA, as they're doing with the NeoSmelt project, as I mentioned earlier. Japan, of course, you know, the Japanese government is supporting the steel industry there with their own R&D sort of investigations, and I think, you know, one opportunity there would be to sort of open that up to the broader value chain. It would be fantastic to see, you know, while we have bilateral R&D with individual steel mills, it would be great to see how we could participate in those national projects and get greater insights, greater learning right along the value chain.
Tetsu, your final comments?
So to realize, you know, CCS value chain, you know, INPEX is talking with Chubu Electric Company and as well as the JERA for possible CCS value chain between Australia and Japan. So I encourage, you know, Australian government and Japanese government to keep, you know, discussing on the bilateral treaty or bilateral agreement, so that, you know, for us to, you know, possible to import CO2 from Japan to Australia and then inject into the reservoir. This, as Samantha said, you know, this is going to be a huge business opportunity for Australia. But, you know, it also, you know, not only natural gas, but CCS is competing with other CCS projects in Southeast Asia region.
I'd like to open the question. Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Rod Campbell. I'm the Research Director at the Australia Institute. My question is for Murayama-san. Murayama-san, Australia Institute research has shown that INPEX, and in particular the ICTHES project, has never paid a cent in royalties, never paid a cent in PRRT, never paid a cent in company tax, and in fact INPEX has gone out of its way to not supply gas to Australians. So in that context, why on earth should Australia even consider your plans for expansion?
Thank you very much. Firstly, I respectfully decline your comment. INPEX paid the corporate tax. INPEX is start to pay PRRT next year, but PRRT. This is INPEX is supposed to pay PRRT in early 2030s. Because this is based on our investment, when we made investment decision back in 2012, this PRT mechanism, we are supposed to start paying PRT early 2030s. But because of the recent last year's PRT change, we have to start paying PRT next year. This is significantly impacts INPEX project economics. With this political uncertainty, how can we invest in Australia? Tax change significantly impact the project economics, right?
So little tax revenue, why would we want your investment?
Samantha.
Can I just let me just say that, we like to deal with the facts, and the facts are that the industry paid $22 billion in state and federal taxes and royalties last year. We are the second biggest corporate taxpayer in Australia, and we are underpinning the energy security of the nation, of the region. We're supporting 215,000 jobs around Australia. That's why we want the investment, because we've actually done the work to show what happens when we don't get that investment, and the lights go out soon, and we end up with higher emissions because we end up relying on coal and diesel for power generation. So that's why we want the investment.
Dan, could you help us?
I was just going to give perhaps a glib observation that is the problem with INPEX and the other players in the market, or is it with the underlying legislation and obligation to pay? That's the source of the obligation. It's not an INPEX issue, if there is in fact an issue.
I think we can have one more question from the floor. From your side, or? Yes, please. Yes, the mic is coming.
Hello? Can you hear me? Hello? Hello? Oh, it's working now. Hello? Okay. Hi, thanks for the opportunity. My name is Sami Patel. I'm the director of True Blue Plus. I just want to know regarding for hydrogen, especially green hydrogen, there's obviously difficulties with the pricings. What's the solution for long term? How do we actually, bring it down to a feasible option actually using it? So, just if anyone can just answer the question, it'd be perfect. Thank you.
Whom would you like to?
Probably, I think Ben, if you mind.
Yeah, I can start. Yeah, look, I think we have to be pragmatic about hydrogen and the timing of that hydrogen in the transition. I think if you look at the economics around producing green steel with hydrogen today, it's very expensive. It would cost trillions of dollars to convert the steel industry over. So I think we have to be realistic and think about, LNG or natural gas is going to play a huge part of that transition in terms of the DRI process. So I think, technology, obviously, it will play a big part. The renewables energy is going to play a really big part. But I think we just have to be pragmatic about the timing of that transition.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a good question, because I think we are seeing the challenges around sort of deploying green hydrogen. If you look at how much hydrogen is being produced around the world today, it's 95 or so million tonnes. Less than 1% of that is low carbon hydrogen, and of that 1%, 95% is blue hydrogen, so natural gas with CCS. Now, that's a more mature pathway. There's projects that have been operating for years and years now. It's a much lower cost pathway. So I think there's a strong case for Australia to start broadening its focus in terms of a hydrogen strategy, still including, of course, green hydrogen, but also looking at early opportunities around blue hydrogen, so natural gas with CCS. It's bringing together, what is really our skill set, I think, in terms of our capacity around CCS, but also our natural gas resources.
Just a final observation from me. When we look at the magic number and the levelised cost of the molecule, particularly in the Australian context, all of the issues that we're facing at the moment in many of our other industries are felt in the green hydrogen space. If we want to do this, we need to do it at scale in order to make the economics work. You look at the incredible investment you need in upstream renewables just to feed those electrolysers. You then look at the cost of developing those electrolysers, you then look at the port projects and infrastructure that's needed to ship that hydrogen. when you add each of those elements together, you're talking about multi-billions of dollars of project on project risk. And when we're seeing all the issues with supply chains, with labour costs, with environmental and other delays, that's just making it so much more challenging in the Australian context. And that's why I think the headwinds have really started to blunt that. And I agree with Samantha, if we can think differently about what hydrogen means for us and play to our strengths in the industries where we're already developing the infrastructure that can help support that, that might help us find a pathway to that ultimate nirvana of green hydrogen.
Thank you very much for all the panelists and the audience who made wonderful questions. And I think we have come to the conclusion that valuable contribution, which were really valuable contribution to this discussion. And I just want to ask everyone to join me in giving a round of applause to all the panelists.